Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight on another Amouage. I'm on a little bit of an Amouage kick here, putting these videos out for you guys, and today it's going to be from the library collection, and we are moving on to Opus 3. Now, this came out in 2010, so whenever the library collection was launched, there were actually three that were pretty much released at once. Number 1, number 2, number 3. And if you actually look at the little card that came with the original, this is a vintage decant, what it looks like. The new ones don't look like this anymore. They now look like a more modernized Amouage sample. You'll know from just the way that Amouage is even written on the packaging, it's a new one, and it doesn't have the gold cap anymore and stuff like that. I don't think it matters. But yes, they have kind of updated their packaging, if you will. So when it first came out, basically what they gave you was a note listing for all three. So here was Opus 1, here was Opus 2, and here was Opus 3. So we're on to Opus 3. But they were all basically released in 2010 at once when the library collection was launched. And then more and more started to come out, right? So Christopher Chong was the creative director at the time. The perfumer is Karine Vinchon Spenner. And what's crazy is this is actually one of her earlier works, okay? So she's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, female perfumer. I think she is absolutely stunning and amazing, and her work is one of my favorite from Amouage. I love some of the stuff that she's done at Amouage. Just a little bit of an homage to her. I have a Perfumer's portfolio video on her. She did Memoir Man, which I still need to review all but one of her scents that I'm going to talk about here. But she did Memoir Man in 2010 at the same time as Opus 3. So this is actually why it's such a shock I haven't talked about this fragrance on the channel yet. Well, I didn't own it. So I did get a chance to wear this once before. This is the second time I've had a chance to wear it. But I'm just going to do a fresh spray because I really like this fragrance. So this is a big win for me. I would totally own a bottle of this if money was just no issue. 100 mils is $405 retail. You can still buy it from the Amouage website. And I think they also sell 50 mils for a little bit less. But God, so good. So she did Memoir in 2010 along with this Opus 3. She did Fate, I think, in 2013, Fate Man, which if you're a cumin fan, this is like the cumin fragrance to end all cumin fragrances. She did Myths Man in 2016, which you can see the dent I put in that bottle. I absolutely love some of her creations. God, Myths is so different and special. And then she did Overture Man in 2019, one of Chong's last fragrances. And I reviewed this on the channel very recently, so you can go check out my review of Overture Man, one of my favorite cognac boozy fragrances of all time. Slightly animalic as well, and ambery. And in 2021, she did Boundless, which this is probably my least favorite fragrance from her that she created. And it's under the new tutelage of the new creative director. And this is not a bad fragrance. It's just, it's so different from the other Amouage. Every single Amouage fragrance that she put out is different, but it still kind of stood alone. Like there is nothing like Memoir. There's nothing like Fate. There's nothing like Myths. There's nothing like Overture Man. There are other fragrances out there that smell like Boundless. And so that's one of the reasons why it's taken me a little bit of time to sort of warm up to Boundless. And I do think it's a good fragrance. I just don't think it has the audacity, you know, the strength of an Amouage to kind of stand on its own and say, I'm completely different from everything else out there. This is sort of, and I'll review this one of these days, but this is where Amouage took a turn and I pretty much stopped. I blind bought this and I was like, nope, no more of that. I will not be blind buying any more Amouages. So let's talk about Opus 3. Because Opus 3, I'll read you the little blurb of how they used to introduce the library collection. So the library collections are created as a timeless olfactory adventure that pay no attention to current trends. The collection is not classified by gender. So that was one thing Amouage used to do. Like, for example, this was Fate Man, right? They used to do like a man and a woman's version. And with this library collection, the idea was that they wanted to make a unisex sort of offering at the time. So these were not classified by gender. They're intended to highlight the quality and of the essences and glorify the act of creativity, skill, and art. And it says, of course, Christopher Chong was a creative director, credited for creating the collection. The new fragrances represent the memories, as their very names are associated with the library in which many hidden treasures that lead us to ongoing research and study are hidden. The library collection is essentially a poetic homage to the art of living. Opus 3, the third fragrance of the luxurious Amouage library collection, go figure, created by the perfumer Karine Vinchon Spenner. Floral notes, okay, so I'm not going to read the note listing now, but I'll get to that later on. But I do want to read sort of the little blurb that came with the, this is how they used to introduce the library collection. Inspired by the omniscient allure of a library, this collection is a celebration of integrity, creativity, and virtuosity, a place where the soul leaves an imprint of the art of living. The Amouage Library Collection is a poetic homage to an olfactory exploration. So a little different than what is written up on Fragrantica right now. And the way that the website on Amouage actually introduces this fragrance right now is it says Opus 3 is a radiant floral oriental inspired by the art and science of the creative process, from the darkest moments of frustration to the brightness of enlightenment and discovery. Interesting. Okay. So, first of all, I'm in love with Karine Vinchon Spenner's work, like I said, and I think this is absolutely amazing, and I can't believe this is one of her earliest works, and I can't believe I don't have a bottle of this. I'll say that right now. It is fantastic. This is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful fragrance, and to think this came out in 2010 at the same time Memoir Man, it's like blowing my mind, even now. And so, you know, there are, I think, some perfumers who just need some runway, you know, to really get going. And you see that with some new perfumers break onto the scene, and it just feels like they got to kind of get their legs under them. They got to get their speed up on the runway before they really take off. Karine Vinchon Spenner took off, to me, like an osprey. I mean, just vertical, or a harrier if you're English, right? Just a straight vertical increase, and no runway needed. And, you know, she just kind of hit the ground running. And I don't know if that was Christopher Chong just sort of working with her and they just teamed up so well, or what, but she just burst onto the scene, in my opinion. And this really proves some of her just absolute skill. So if, you know, if I kind of put the library collection, if I was sampling the library collection in order, right? So if I started with 1, went to 2, and went to 3, as soon as I got to 3, I would be like, this is the best one of the 3 I've tried so far, let's say, if you're going in order back then. I think that there is a unbelievably brilliant and, I mean brilliantly executed carnation accord in the top of this. So by the way, my scent of the day is this. Today was a very special day in the Ram household because one of my relatives from Jordan came here, and it's the first time I've seen him in 27 years. I was a little boy. Well, I wasn't a little boy, but I was like 12 last time I saw him. And so half a lifetime, you know, or whatever you want to call it, has kind of passed, and then I got to see him again today. So I decided to wear this, a very special fragrance, one of my favorite Russian Adam creations. It's Antiquity. And the reason I'm mentioning this as my scent of the day, other than just showing you guys my scent of the day, is there is a absolutely stunning carnation accord in here. And this fragrance really reminds me of going back in time and smelling some of the early Guerlain fragrances. If you like that style of perfumery, imagine adding real Cambodian oud to this, and that gets you in the ballpark, okay? This fragrance does something very similar to me. Opus 3, the reason I decided to review it today, I can't talk, sorry. It was a long day. It's 11 o'clock at night. And one of the reasons I decided to review it today is I thought the carnation accord here would actually go pretty well with the carnation accord in Antiquity. So it wouldn't really clash. And man, was I right. It is absolutely stunning. In fact, it inspired me to get some actual Carnation Absolute. This is actual Carnation Absolute, and put it on a blotter. And Carnation, man, I love Carnation in a composition. I just adore it. I wish they never went away from using Carnation like they used to in the 70s and 80s, especially in masculine perfumery. It adds this unbelievable sort of green, spicy, floral aspect. Sometimes it can come across as almost feeling like like you've just picked the leaves and maybe the green bulbs of the flowers and just put them in a blender and blended it up with spices. Sometimes that's actually how the carnation accord itself comes across. And you know, the carnation here almost smells like you're smelling carnation absolute. The absolutes are usually a little bit heavier, but when you first spray Opus 3, you will get that carnation accord right from the beginning. And if you're a lover of vintage perfume, this will instantly take you back, okay? This will take you back to the day. There's no doubt about it. It is green, and like I said, just imagine this very spicy iteration of carnation where the greenness, the leaves are really allowed to sort of just blend through. And imagine you've then taken it and blended it with an old Guerlain that almost has this old school anisic aldehyde-like smell. So in Antiquity, there's a peach aldehyde in here, okay? So in the aldehyde that I'm kind of thinking of is, imagine something like what was used in Après Londe. I don't have a bottle of that, so I'm just going to show you Jean-Claude Elena's interpretation of that, L'eau d'hiver. If you've smelled sort of the way that the, almost like almondy, slightly vanillic, but this anisic aldehyde-like smell in L'eau d'hiver comes across, right? And this beautiful, very powdery, okay? Beautiful powdery sort of mix with the carnation is a note called mimosa, right? And so mimosa has this very honey-like floral smell, they say. But what really comes across here is this beautiful powdery aspect. And as a man, I have no problem, absolutely no problem wearing this. Yes, it does open up slightly floral with the carnation and the mimosa, but the carnation is a masculine floral note to me as a vintage lover of perfume, right? And the mimosa, yes, it comes across as powdery, but it's mixed with thyme, which I think is a masculine note, nutmeg, I think that's a masculine note, and broom, okay? So those three notes in the top are kind of what you get first. And instantly you're going to notice that the fragrance comes across, if you've ever smelled some of the old Guerlains, like for example, if you've ever smelled something like Bleue, right? Bleue sort of has this, it's actually written here on the back because this is an old tester bottle. You can see right there it says heliotrope, right? I think Bleue is kind of a heliotrope heavy composition to me. Every time I wear it, I get a lot of heliotrope. And heliotrope is sort of one of those flowers that can really overpower if you're not careful. It's a very strong flower, but it comes across as being very sort of pudgy is the way I would describe it. I've described it as like Play-Doh-like, but it has this almondy facet to it as well, right? And if you've smelled sort of the heliotrope in here, you will kind of get an idea of the way that the Oriental aspects of Opus 3 are sort of executed, if you will, because even though there's no heliotrope listed in Opus 3, it wears like there is. It wears like there's sort of this very pudginess to it. And so this fragrance actually inspired me to put a couple ingredients, not just one. Oh no, I dropped it right when I wanted to show you guys. Okay, it stayed. It's hard enough it actually stayed. But I took some actual benzoin that Russian Adam sent to me, and I put it on a blotter. And I just want you to look at what it ended up doing. So I thought it was just going to, you know, coat the blotter, kind of like the carnation did, right? Just kind of turn the blotter a certain color, and it just kind of, just like you would expect dipping it in something like that, right? But the benzoin is actually so resinous and thick. Look what it did. It almost looks like a hair is stuck to it. It's not a hair. It's actually what the benzoin ended up making when I pulled it out of there. It's like glue. It's literally like glue. That's how thick it is. And this fragrance kind of wears exactly like this. This is one of the best representations of that Oriental creation that Karine Vinchon Spinner made, because you get the benzoin, and so you get a little bit of benzoin and a little bit of vanilla, but it wears slightly resinous, and it just feels like there's this unbelievable warmth to the fragrance, right? And a little bit of layers. Like the fragrance has layers. It feels like it has depth. It doesn't feel thin Doesn't feel like a sheer veneer. Doesn't feel thin. You know, yesterday I reviewed a fragrance from the house of Katana, which is a house I actually really like. And if you're into artisanal houses like Areej Dore or Bortnikov or Ensar, check out the house of Katana. You know, I think they're one step below to me. I think that the gentleman who runs it, Alp, has a lot of potential, but I think he needs a little bit more work on kind of rounding all the compositions out. But they just wear very light and very thin. Even though I like the compositions, they're very thin. And this doesn't have that problem. This is a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth in Opus 3 to me. And there's also something unbelievably comfortable and familiar with wearing this composition. It's so comforting. It's just, to me, you know, if you've ever smelled some of these sort of, how would I put it? So, you know, if you've ever smelled some of these old school blends of something like leather and iris, or leather and orris root or violet or something like that, like if you've smelled sort of the, let's see, do I have it here? Aha, I do. So if you smelled something like Cuir Cannage, right? There is a little bit, this is amped up even more, okay? So there's actually no leather in Opus 3, but I want you to imagine sort of just removing that very sort of purple smelling iris that you get in Cuir Cannage or Roja's Great Britain. Or another great example of that would be something like this. This is Lancome's Cuir de Lancome. This is actually probably the best example. Not as much, this goes in a little different direction, although I love Cuir Cannage. I think this is actually closer to Opus 3 to me, because this focuses more on sort of that very pudgy aspect of it, and less so on sort of the leather. There is leather in here, but you get a lot of vanillas and stuff like that in Cuir de Lancome. It's a very floral take on leather as well. And so I just want you to imagine if you just created something like this and removed the leather altogether, or the leathery aspects that you got came from things like the Ambrette seed or some of the other notes in here. There wasn't a true proper leather, but you left that violet purple smelling iris in the composition. That's a little bit of how, to me, sort of the fragrance wears, if you will. And it's a beautiful, beautiful wear. I love this. I love these type of fragrances. Everyone I mentioned that has this sort of purple irisy, you know, mix between leather and violet and iris, if you will. I love those type of fragrances. They're really my kind of scents. I love wearing them. But this does something similar, but imagine just removing the iris and replacing it with some Amouage-like materials. So you get things like Ambrette. You get things like papyrus, which if you watched my Opus 2 review, you know that I mentioned that I thought that there was a lost opportunity with the whole library collection to list a papyrus note in there. They didn't list it, but it smelled like there was some papyrus. So obviously there's a little bit of a theme, you know, going on with Christopher Chong early on in the library collection. He was really playing with that library papery papyrus note. And the other thing, so Amouage, if you listen to that write-up I read, they really chose to focus on the floral aspect, saying it's a radiant floral. But for me, I get much more of the Orientals in the blend, much more of the benzoin, much more of the vanilla. And that iris really feels like it's like a heliotrope, like a pudgy, like a Play-Doh-y iris. It feels that way to me. You know, the fragrance wears that way. Think about the benzoin that I showed you and just how thick. I mean, look, I put it down and look at that. You know, it is, it really wears, look how thick that and bright orange that resin is. And it smells so sort of warm. There's this warm aspect to it. Maybe even a slightly boozy, just ever so slightly boozy aspect to it. And of course the vanilla touches as well. But what makes the fragrance, I think, add some slightly leathery touches as well. Ever so slightly, not leathery in the sense of a Cuir Cannage or a Roja's Great Britain, but just leathery, as in there is a note in here that is not leather, but I think that note has some leathery facets, and that's the Ambrette seed. So Ambrette seed is one of my favorite musk substitutes, if you will. It's actually a plant that it's a very expensive note to use in perfumery, actually. Very, very extremely expensive. And it makes the fragrance smell very posh and high class to me. And slightly animalic as well. Just ever so slightly animalic. Not animalic in the way that real musk smells animalic. Not like pissy or anything like that. But there's something just slightly dirty that it gives off. It gives off a little bit of this, you know, bad, maybe this this vibe of, you know, there's just something a little dirty underneath, right? And like I said, it's one of my favorite musk substitutes, if you will, because it just makes everything feel very full-bodied. So if you notice the language I'm using while I'm discussing the scent, you know, lots of layers, not a thin veneer, full-bodied, right? Those are kind of the things that come to mind as I smell Opus 3. And it gives off this very musky, slightly leathery, but iris feel. Ambrette can sometimes feel like you're smelling iris because of the powderiness of it and the powdery muskiness of it all. And some would say, again, boozy as well. Ambrette also has a little bit of booziness to it. Benzoin can come across as having this sort of ambery booziness. And so when you add that ambery booziness to it and you blend it with the violet, all right, and just the composition overall, the woods, as the fragrance begins to dry further and further, it gets further away. So here's a 3.5 hour dry down, and it gets further and further away from that green carnation spicy bit I was talking about in the beginning with the powdery honeyed like mimosa coming in, and it goes further and further to closer to this sort of smoked woods, this smoky, woody, papery papyrus feel. More of the papyrus comes in, which can have a very dry effect, right? So the fragrance itself doesn't necessarily feel dry, but there are dry elements that kind of come in and out, and it's because of that, you know, ambery benzoin and, like I said, the ambrette, the musk, the vanilla. It makes it feel full-bodied, and it doesn't have the extreme dry effect, but there are some dry notes in here, like the papyrus, and the papyrus can give off this very sort of ashy, papery, you know, just imagine you've lit papyrus and burned it for a little bit and then put it out, and just imagine the part where you can see where the paper was burnt and it's still maybe a little bit charred and black, but the rest of the paper is fine, right? A little bit of that with a beautiful combo of 3 woods: cedar, sandalwood, and gaiac wood. And the gaiac wood really kind of jumps out to my nose as it continues to dry. From memory, when I've worn this to bed previously, I thought the gaiac wood and the papyrus sort of really teamed up and made it smell smokier and woodier into the dry down, and made it give it just a little bit of a tint more towards what that Amouage DNA you would expect. I think that, you know, this doesn't smell like it has huge incense or anything like that. I think if you gave this to someone, they probably wouldn't guess it was an Amouage. It doesn't have that sort of appeal to it, but the quality is unmistakable. And if you like this type of perfume, I think this is a home run stunner. Best of the first 3 of the Opus lines, and so out of 1, 2, and 3, number 3 is my favorite so far. So there's also, I should mention, there is a fragrance that Karine Vinchon Spenner worked on for a house I've never smelled anything from before. The name of the house is called Dore, and she worked on it with a perfumer named Jacques Flory, who is pretty well known in the industry, and Cédionne Lancessor, who I have no clue any about Cédionne's work, but the fragrance is called, it used to be called Ambre Mercury, and they renamed it to Goutte de Mercury. I don't know anything about this house, Terry, but many people compare this fragrance, which came out 2 years after Opus 3, to Opus 3, because it has many similar notes: benzoin, violet, ylang ylang, iris, orris, jasmine, sandalwood, vanilla. So I don't know how close it is, but just something I thought I should mention. I don't know if anyone smelled that. Let me know if it's close to Opus 3 or if it's just internet speculation. But really, really like Opus 3. And this just really brings me back to how great of a perfumer Karine Vinchon Spenner is. And I can't believe it took me this long to really do a proper video on Opus 3. I'm going to start trying to pound some of these Opus, videos out. And so, if you have experience with this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I love the interaction, the back and forth with you guys. This is supposed to be kind of a late night insight, but it's an Amouage. So, I'm going to ramble for almost 30 minutes about it. But yes, a definite winner. Opus 3, if you had to sample one out of the first three, I would say Opus 3 is the one to sample. If you have tastes like mine, but you have to be okay with a little bit of that powdery floral aspect. But I think this is just so well done and in a style that I just really love. I think they have a winner with Opus 3 for sure. Now, would I buy a bottle? I don't think I would, just because I would have no problem wearing something like Cuir de Lancome or Bleue, or I mentioned earlier L'eau d'hiver, which again, they're not all the same fragrance, obviously. Even Cuir Cannage or Roge's Great Britain, I think would scratch the same itch, if you will. It would scratch the same itch. They go in different directions, but it would be a lot for me to fork out $400 for a bottle of Opus 3. I would love to have it in the collection, though. It's just when you've spent years and a decade collecting, you're going to have fragrances that play in the same sandbox. And I have a lot that play in this sandbox, because this is a sandbox I really, really like. So, for me, I think with where I'm at, I probably just wear stuff like this, but Opus 3 is amazing. I'd love to have a bottle one day. So that's sort of my take. Hope everyone enjoyed the review. Do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.